I'm super happy to be with you in Ostrava. We just met here, although we met online before, and I discovered your work and discovered how connected it is with my own work and the way I see the world. Tell me a little bit about you. Who are you? And tell me more about how you see the evolution of consciousness.
Well, I feel the same, Bruno. Having heard you speak a few minutes ago, I just loved what you had to say, and I'm so glad we ran into each other here, because it is a very similar message about consciousness and about the future and how we mold the future through individual consciousness. And I was an economic hitman, as chief economist at a major consulting firm, but really what my job was to rip off the world with resources for our corporations.
Which made your first, most famous book.
That's my most famous book. And I've written 4 on that subject, but I've also written 5 on indigenous people and shamanism, which is my love. And my life was saved by a shaman back in the late 60s, early 70s, when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Amazon. I still go back there all the time and headed there after being here. And one of the things that I learned from them, and is so important, I think, is that there are really 2 realities. It's the objective reality. This camera that we're talking through, an objective reality. And then there's a perceived reality, our words, what we're talking about. And that's really the consciousness that's tied in with the consciousness. And for human beings, everything that happens in an objective reality is molded by perceived reality. So if we look at, for example, pre-Copernicus, it was believed that everything revolved around the Earth. And that had a huge impact on religion, on science, on social, on everything. And then when Copernicus said, no, we revolve around the sun, that changed everything. And of course now with the Hubble telescope, we're seeing that there's billions of solar systems, billions of galaxies, like the Milky Way out there. And that's giving us a whole new perspective. And it ties in with your whole thing about fractals. The whole universe is a fractal. It's, and so how now do we move from a perception that's created a system throughout the world that really isn't working anymore? We've created an economic system, and it's a social political system that I call a death economy. Yeah, and it's based to a large degree on warfare or the threat of warfare. That the whole economy, so the United States economy, is very dependent on militarization and on destroying the earth, digging up the very resources upon which the economy depends. And it all revolves around a perception of maximization of material goods, maximization of short-term profits. We must create a new perception, each of us as individuals, that our lives are much greater than that. It's not just about maximizing the short term. We've got to create a life economy, an economic system that's built on cleaning up pollution, regenerating destroyed environments, new technologies like your house.
Yes.
that operates on solar and wind, to move into that new sense that it's all got to be about our long-term survival. And the indigenous people have always lived that way. We all come from that history. Human history is all about people looking at the long term until recently.
Very interesting, fascinating. How do you see the evolution of consciousness? You gave example how it evolved in the past with Copernicus, with all these things. How do you see it evolving in the coming years?
I think it's happening. I think today you talked about artificial intelligence and how you believe it's coming soon. I do too. And I think there's something very important about artificial intelligence. I don't think it will ever quite emulate our kinds of intelligence, but what it will be able to do is look at situations very objectively, look at crises objectively, and come up with the necessary solutions that are basically indisputable. It won't bring into play the biases that we have, our ego biases, our nationalistic biases, Trump versus Putin versus whatever. That won't be there for the AI. So my hope is that we will listen and we'll say, hey, it's smarter than we are about looking at the problems at least, and the solutions. Maybe it won't be as good at some things, but who knows? But it will be good at looking at problems and suggesting solutions, and I hope we will follow those. I also think there's a change of consciousness already that we're really feeling. That so many people know now that there is climate change, that we have to do something about it, and so I believe it's happening. I tend to be optimistic, although as you mentioned at your talk today, I go through those bad days too. I just wake up and say, oh my God, what next?
And do you see the human brain evolving itself? Like on one hand there is the machine evolving. Do you think our brain can and will evolve, or it's the end?
I'm not a neurologist or a neuroscientist, so I don't know about the mechanisms within the brain, but I do see the consciousness evolving. And we're already experiencing that. So did the brain have to evolve for the world to accept that Copernicus was right? And of course, actually, the early Greeks already knew that the Earth revolved around the sun, but it took 1,000 years or so for Copernicus to get the message out where people really accepted it. Did the brain have to change in that time? I don't know, neurologically speaking, but the consciousness certainly changed. And so I think that's what's really important now, is that we're seeing a true change in consciousness. I also think at the same time we're seeing a backlash. So those who represent the status quo,
yes.
and that's the politics of Brexit, it's the politics of so much of the world right now, including my own country, the Trump, that we're seeing. But all of this comes from very dissatisfied people that are saying it just isn't working.
It's not working.
It's not working. And some of them on the right want to believe in authoritarianism, they go for Trump. The ones on the left who want to go for a more loose socialistic type of, they'll go for in the United States, a Sanders type. And we're seeing that in France, we're seeing it everywhere. But it all comes, I think, from the same dissatisfaction. And that's part of the changing consciousness that's happening, is we're understanding that what we've been doing isn't enough.
So you have two last questions. The first one is, what kind of advice you would give to somebody who wants to help his or her consciousness to evolve? What is the thing I should do, or somebody should do, like to have this kind of aha moment like Copernicus? How can we engineer this, if we can?
I think, to start with, what you said in your talk today, get up every morning and write down your dream, and include as part of that dream, we will create a life economy, and I will be part of it. And that may simply mean that I'm going to recycle more. I'm going to be more conscious of my shopping techniques. Or it may mean that I'm going to write a brilliant book that changes everything. Or it may mean that I'm going to run for prime minister, or, but whatever it is, if everybody gets up every morning, if everybody listening to this gets up in the morning and says, we can and we must and we will create a life economy, and I'm going to be part of it.
Excellent. So last question. What would be your advice to somebody, especially maybe a young person, like 20, 25, even younger? What would be your three most important advice to be future fit, to be ready for this new world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first one is be flexible. Realize that everything's going to change radically in your lifetime. It's changed radically in my lifetime. It's going to change much more. I have a 10-year-old grandson, and the best thing I can teach him is it's unstable. It's chaotic. And I think a second thing is follow your heart always.
Follow your heart.
Follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say. Do what really most appeals to you. If you want to write. If you want to be an engineer, be an engineer. If you want to be a plumber, be a plumber. Follow what really strikes you. And I think the last thing, and then that includes enjoying life deeply. And the last thing is to really believe and know that we can create a whole new system. It's what I'm calling a life economy or a peace economy, that we can do that, and we must, and we will.
Wow, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating to meet you by chance here. I can't wait for your talk tomorrow. Of course, I will put with the video all the link to your website. You have an amazing website, and all your books. I will put everything. Thank you so much.
I'll do the same. Thank you. Thanks, Bruno.